We are live, live, live. Good morning. Hi, Key. Good morning. Happy Sunday, people. Good Sunday to you all. I have a guest, so you all should be impressed that I have a guest 2 weeks in a row because I've been slacking. So I am excited that I have guests and people showing up to talk so that I'm just not the only one entertaining you all. But I thank you all each time for just allowing me that flexibility. Good afternoon, afternoon, afternoon. Thank you, Crystal. Happy Sunday, good people. All right, I am going to do my intro and then we'll get started. Have my guest introduce herself. So, this is Miss Bohemian Soul TV. And as I introduce myself, my name is Jewel Pearson. And I always say that I built a fancy tiny house in 2015 because I don't believe you have to give up luxury to go tiny. And since that time, I have shared my journey to inspire others who are interested in the movement. I do offer coaching and consultations to help others in their tiny house journey. And you'll be able to find links to schedule with me in the video description below. And I serve up a lot of representation along the way as I'm doing all of that. I want us to see ourselves in this movement. I want us to be successful in this movement. And that is what my guest is also going to help us be. And if you find this information and the video helpful, I hope you will like it. As Crystal has already been on her job this morning, not really her job, but her job that she does in the community, and I appreciate her for it. But like it, share it, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification so that you'll know when content is live and available here. So good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome, Adalia. Please introduce
Thank
yourself
you.
to my guests.
I am Adalia Aborashade, aka Picky Girl Travels the World. I think that is probably what I'm most famous for is being picky. I am a picky eater, but I am also picky about how I live life. Very much, I believe that we got one life and we need to live it in the way that we see fit. And so that's what I started to do about 10 years ago. Blew up my life, made some major changes. And then 8 years ago, I left the United States and I moved abroad. 5 years ago, I retired early on a school teacher salary. And so now, although I am, I guess, technically retired, um, I like to help women, particularly Black and Brown women, um, live the life that they want. And a big piece of that is understanding their finances, getting more confidence in that area. So that's primarily what I do.
Okay.
I also host retreats for women to reclaim themselves, reclaim their lives, reclaim their happiness with my friend, roommate, business partner, Ivana Robinson. So um, it sounds now that I've said all that, it sounds like I'm really busy, but I don't
It
be trying to be
does.
doing all that.
It does. It sounds like you're doing all the things.
I am not.
Well, that's good. We like that you figured out how to master money and also not do a lot of things. So that's what I'm hoping you'll help us and my guests also master. So your bio, that's what your bio says. You help women master their money and you demystify money. Talk about the demystification of money. What does that really represent?
um, I when people talk about talking to me, they're like, "Oh, you always, make it plain. You share such practical things." And I think that's part of just who I am as a person. But I feel like a lot of the conversations about money, like beyond the personal things we bring to it and whatever baggage we have from our upbringing, but as a society, we don't like to talk about money.
Mhm.
It's how to make it, how to keep it, how to grow it, all that kind of stuff is like, I feel like enshrined in mystery and only special people get to know.
Right.
And I think that's all BS.
Okay.
Um, and I have always been somebody who like, oh, we're gonna figure out how to do this. Like,
Okay.
and so that's what I help other people do.
Okay. That that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Um, one of the things that I've also seen that you talk about is making confident financial decisions. Talk talk to us about what that looks like, and then also how, if one hasn't been making confidential confident financial decisions, how or is it possible to recover?
Absolutely is possible to recover, because I was not born knowing the things I know. I made some really dumb decisions, like the time I let some man put his rims on my credit card.
Uh-oh.
So, like I said, like,
She said some man, some man, like he was a random walking down the street.
unfortunately, he wasn't some random one, but, like, I wish I had had more sense back then. That was not a great decision. It was not a confident financial decision. So, absolutely, you can come back from that. But I've I think I noticed this was some years ago, and I saw women in particular sort of feeling like helpless when
Mhm,
it came to like how money worked or what they could be doing with their money, how they could improve their financial situation. And I think capitalism has done a good job in making us think that we can't do that. We've got to pay an expert to do that. Like
mhm,
that's some higher level skill thing that it's not possible for us to do. And I think that's actually pretty dangerous. I want us to be good consumers in all ways.
okay,
Like, when you go to buy a car, there's certain things that you do when you go, like you don't let them know how much you're willing to pay. Like you get your own finance. There's those kinds of things, and I think that applies when it comes to like investing and other aspects of money. And so I kept running into women who felt sort of like, well, I don't know. I'll just turn my money over to somebody else and they'll take care of it. And like I said, I think that's dangerous because nobody is going to take care of your money better than you. Nobody you pay is going to have your financial welfare at the forefront the way that you would. I would not turn over to me, that's like turning over your life to let somebody else live it for you. I would never do that. So why would I do that with my money? And so, um, based on my observation and my conversations, it seems like, oh, it's a lack of knowledge,
mhm,
but I think a big piece of it is a lack of confidence. This
mhm,
idea that I'm not capable of making this call, making this decision, making this move, and absolutely you are. And
mhm,
so that's like when I put that together, that's kind of shifted my focus. The work that I do is around financial education because, like, there's a lot of stuff we didn't learn
mhm. Oh,
growing
absolutely,
up.
absolutely.
And it's filling that gap, but also having the confidence to know that if I don't know this, I know how to ask the right questions and get the answers that I need in order to make an informed decision.
So, in asking questions and WLJ, thank you for the compliment on my cheap readers. I'm sick of them, but thank you. um, you just WLJ just mentioned this, that having to learn about money by observing what people do, not because they were willing to have the conversations. And you just mentioned asking the right questions. Money in financial management, investing, I feel like there's a lot of gatekeeping around
100%.
those conversations. It's almost like, I have I don't want to talk about how I got here. I'm just here. You figure out how to get there. Who are we asking those questions of? What do you think about I'm sure you know there's a lot of gatekeeping in it because that's what you do. What are your thoughts around that?
I I think the other thing is I have always been a question asker, and that has gotten me in trouble in a lot of spaces because some folks see you asking questions as a threat to what
Right,
they do.
right.
Um, but like I did a video a long time ago on my YouTube channel about like questions you should be asking about your money. So, anything from like, oh, I'm opening a bank account or I have this credit card. Well, what what's the interest rate you're paying? How are they calculating that interest rate? Like it's part of that saying like the more you know.
Mhm.
So it's I want people to understand the people that they are working with, the companies they are working with in all aspects.
Okay.
So I think about the first house that I bought. I wanted to know, I didn't just like, oh, they were like, here, sign here, do this. And I'm asking questions. Well, like, what happens if I pay this loan off early?
Mhm.
Are there, I did not grow up with folks who were even aware probably that you could pay off a mortgage early, let alone would have thought to ask, okay, are there any like strings attached to this? Are there any prepayment penalties? Or the fact that I only could put down 3%, 5%. It was some little teeny tiny amount. And so, they put in private mortgage insurance. And some people would just accept, oh, I've got to pay this extra forever. No, I wanted to know at what point can I remove that? What does the balance have to be? What's the process? So when I say asking questions, it's all of those things. But also, I think about because I know one of my big things I talk about is that, yes, you can take care of your money, you can manage your money. This is something you absolutely can do. But as you mentioned, the gatekeepers,
Mhm.
they perpetuate this idea that no, you can't.
Mhm.
And you need them. So, and I get everybody doesn't want to, even if they can, they may not want to manage their money and they might want to turn that over to somebody else, but you still got to ask the right questions. You need to understand, how's this person getting paid? Do they get compensation when they make recommendations to you? Are they getting paid by you only or by the back? Because, like all of that, I need to understand, do you have my best interest at heart?
Mhm.
So when I say ask the right questions, I want us to be informed consumers. I don't want us to leave anything unasked, if at all possible.
I think that confidence building, like it's like the the chicken and the egg. You gotta have the confidence to be able to ask the questions, but you're scared to ask the questions until you have the confidence. And so it's like, how do I build my confidence? And because it's definitely one of those things that you're scared to screw up because it's money.
And I think sometimes if we don't have a lot of money,
Mhm.
we feel even more so
Absolutely.
that way.
Absolutely.
And something my mama used to always tell me is that my money is green everywhere. Even if I only got $10, it's
Mm,
still green everywhere. So if I don't like when I start to ask questions and I don't like how you feel about me asking those questions, like you are taken aback, you're like, oh,
mhm,
trying to downplay it, shut me out. I am very good about going elsewhere
mhm.
because my money is green everywhere. And so I think maybe that was like the first bit of financial confidence I had was that I'm not in a position where I have to work with these people or I have to uh, patronize this bank, this company, this whatever.
Okay. For someone who hasn't had that confidence, your mom is saying my money is green everywhere. It kind of reminds my mother used to say, I put my pants on that I they put their pants on just like me. And growing up, that just was like, what are we talking about here? But now it makes so much sense from you aren't any better than me. We all put our pants
Absolutely.
on the same way. For someone who hasn't had, because especially in our community, there hasn't been a lot of um, education around it, and I know that's something that you deal in. And oftentimes not through any fault of our own. If you don't have it, if you don't know how to do it, there's very little that you can the skill set that you can transfer on. How does one start building the confidence?
I think it's I think it's easier now than, let's say, 20 years ago, because I got some information, some knowledge from my mother, but it was, the generic, save your money. She
Mhm.
didn't say nothing about investing.
Mhm.
Saving is not gonna cut it long term. It was the generic stuff like save your money, don't carry debt. That was about the most that I got. And that got me pretty far. But then after that, I had to start supplementing that education. And it's a lot easier to do now than it was, let's say, 20 years ago. With, between financial blogs, YouTube channels, content creators, all of that.
Okay.
Um, and there are some books. I think one of the best books to read is The Psychology of Money,
Okay.
because particularly if you're coming from a place where the people in your life did not talk about money,
Mhm.
or money was this like anxiety inducing thing. It was something like, oh, we never have enough of it, that sort of thing. That's going to influence your behavior in ways that you could never understand. And
Right.
reading The Psychology of Money helped me realize like how much of we were talking about before, like making mistakes, like I let that man put his rims on my credit card. um that
We need to go talk to him and get that money back, because that's we need to get past it.
it's all right. It's all right. But again, I I mention that because I know some people might look at me and think, "Oh, well, she's got it all figured out and she's always had it all figured out." Absolutely not.
Mhm.
Absolutely not. Um, but in The Psychology of Money, understanding that a lot of the way we think and a lot of our behavior, it is psychological. It's not so much about how much money you have or don't have. That so much of it is psychological. So that's a book I would start with.
Okay.
And then another kind of base level book, uh, for, let's say, somebody's like, I want to invest,
Okay.
but this is like out of the realm of
Right.
anything I know about and other people know about. J.L. Collins wrote a book, The Simple Path to Wealth.
Okay, and I'm gonna
Um,
put links to these books I'm writing it down so I can put it in the description, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, so that book is a good one to read, and like Your Money or Your Life, and I forget who that book is by.
Your money and your
That
life,
Your Money or Your Life.
or your life. Okay. Okay.
That's kind of like where I would start. Because it kind of gives you in each of those books, like it's going to be things that maybe you've never thought about, um, things you've never heard of. It kind of gives you a place to start because you don't know what you don't know
Right.
because you
Right.
don't know it.
Right.
And so that if I was trying to increase my financial confidence, that is where I would start before I started consuming content online.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I know JL Collins has a really good financial blog, but that's where I would start.
Okay. And I've made notes of all these. I'll put them in the description. Um, I think the other thing that is impactful negatively to money confidence is our capitalistic society that says wealth looks like excess a lot, big things, big shiny cars, and all of the things. And some of that is easy to get, but behind the scenes, folks are in the struggle because those weren't the best financial decisions. And they don't know how to get out of them. And then they find themselves, going down the bad rabbit hole path. What are your thoughts around that?
Absolutely. That's why I recommend Your Money or Your Life, because a lot of the way that we define success in this capitalist system is about things and outward expressions of, yes, I've made it.
Mhm.
Um, there was something else I was gonna say.
Okay.
Oh, The Millionaire Next Door.
Okay.
There's a second edition of that book, but they talk about, like, you know, this popular culture version of what a millionaire looks like. We think that's going to be somebody very showy with their wealth,
Mhm.
driving, these expensive exotic cars and all that. And they're like, no, the majority of millionaires are riding around in Toyota Camrys and Honda Accords.
Right.
Like, it's not about that. So I think that's one of the biggest kind of like reframes or like mindset changes, is to really think about, what does success mean? And I know we can, if somebody just poses that question to you, you can list off the attributes, the house that is this size, this car, doing this thing, blah blah blah. But then you got to ask yourself, are those my definitions of
Right.
for me?
Right.
Do I consider that to be success? Because that's something I went through. I checked many of the boxes. In particular, a big thing was, when I was married, we wanted a house on an acre lot,
Okay.
and built from scratch. We did all that, and I can remember distinctly, about a week after living in that house, thinking, this ain't this ain't all like,
Uh-oh.
knowing what I know now, I
Yeah.
could have just skipped this and saved a lot of money. And
Mhm.
so I was very much caught in that, this is what it means to be successful. And then when I achieved those things, they didn't make me happy.
Right.
And I have since then shifted and really started to examine, okay, so what is it that I consider to be successful, and have made that shift.
Yeah, I think that also for me kind of translates to tiny houses, because the conversation of tiny houses, some people don't want to engage in it because they felt like they represent poverty. Like, you just years ago, when I had first joined the movement, 2017, 2018, Steve Harvey had a conversation on his show, and he said something like, if your dream is a tiny house, you need to dream a bigger dream. And he said, I've lived in my car before, and he equated living in his car to a tiny house. And that disturbed me so much because,
Rightfully so.
so many folks think he is the end all to be all, and he's speaking the gospel, even though he gets on my nerves. And I felt like he had done such great harm to our community, because tiny houses present a lot of opportunity, and I want to talk about that in just a few minutes. And he pissed the community off, the tiny house community off, and I started tweeting him, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but I started sending him pictures of my house of poverty. I forget, he said something, and I said, this is whatever he said. I was like, this is my poverty right here. And I kept sending him pictures of, like, what I felt like is, you've just made this blanket statement, but you've not done any research to look at the opportunity. And he came back and did a show later and actually interviewed somebody from the tiny house movement, And as he shared, a lot of the pictures of my house were on in the background because I know my house is not poverty. It's not living in your car. And so he ended up sharing a lot of pictures of my house as well. It also reminds me of a conversation that I had with a guy who advocates for the unhoused, and someone was introducing me to him from the tiny house perspective that he works with the unhoused. And we had a conversation, and he said to me several times, he was like, I don't want to offend you, but I would never advocate for housing for the unhoused with a tiny house. And he just, I don't want to offend you. He said it like 3 or 4 times. And I finally said, I'm not offended at all. I said, what I know is you don't understand tiny houses. And I said, I'd like to invite you to my house. And as he stood at the curb before he even come in, I knew I already had him because he just stood there looking at my house. And then as soon as he got to the door, he was like, I owe you an apology. Um, and it is that closed mindedness of things have to be big. A tiny house absolutely could not be something that I'd want to aspire to from a financial perspective.
And that the example you gave speaks so heavily to that's so embedded in this capitalist system that one, what is good, great, what you should be striving for is the same for everybody.
Right,
One.
right.
And that two, it has to be like bigger is better, ostentatious is better.
Mm,
And that if that's not what you're striving for, one, what's wrong with you? And two, that you're like a failure. I take big umbrage to that. Because I mean, like that's it. I see it as all being part of the system. You tell people and indoctrinate them to believe that in order to be successful, in order to have made it, they need to achieve this. Well, okay, in order to achieve that thing, what do they have to do? They need to be in a space where they are working constantly because they've got to buy these things. They've got to, because you can't
mhm.
he may not have said this, but you can't just have the nice house. The nice house then has to be filled with all of these things in every room. And it's not about, I don't want to make it sound like it's about the amount of money. It is just that I feel like that bar always is moving. And it's not really about what you want, it's about what everybody else is saying you should want. And I
Yes.
find that really, really problematic. And I think we're going to have to see some sort of shift in that way of thinking and in that mindset because the economic realities of the world that we live in at this moment will not allow us to continue that. We're seeing it with uh, millennials lamenting the fact that they can never own a home, not in the traditional sense,
Right,
not in the way that their parents did.
right,
And that's because the definition of what it means to own a home or all of that is this definition that Steve Harvey and folks like him are talking about. And in the world that we live in, for the financial piece, how much people are earning, where prices are, but also the environmental part of it, like that's not sustainable.
right.
So there's gonna have to be a shift. And it's not, I don't want anybody to think of it as like, oh, well, that means we have to settle. Cause it's not that. Cause I would argue that if most people really examined what it is that they want, that's not what's going to make them happy. In my case, it did not occur to me until after I had already spent or was on the line for hundreds of thousands of dollars that I was like so over this house that I had spent years getting the plans,
Mhm.
finding the subcontract, doing all that stuff for. And I was like, you know what? And this is the truth. After Hurricane Katrina, um, I think it was Brad Pitt had these like they weren't calling them tiny houses, but they were
Yes.
houses that were about like 600 square feet. And
Right.
I looked at that and I was like, I would love that.
Mhm.
And I wanted a tiny house and thought I would have one. And if had I stayed in the US, I'd have probably lived in a tiny house. But no, I think that way of thinking is going to have to come to an end because the realities of the world we live in are not conducive to that.
I agree. I agree 100%. I actually, I see Katrina is in the comments. She and I were talking about this actually this morning. Um, I'd shared an article in my Patreon community about rethinking wealth building. And I say it all the time that we have to rethink the ways that we speak about wealth building because from our capitalistic society, wealth building is attached to land ownership, which we know there's a finite amount of land. And the folks who own most of the land are the billionaires, the corporations, all of those things. We know so much land was colonized, stolen, all of that. And so land's not going to keep growing. So that means if we're attaching wealth building to only land ownership, then that means there's a large contingent of people who won't be wealthy because they don't have land. And then the second way we speak about wealth building is in equity in housing. And just like you said, there are a lot of folks who won't ever have a house, the millennials that are speaking about that. And then year after year, as we look at who actually achieves home ownership and recognize that Black people are on that list, the bottom of the list all the time, we cannot keep assigning those things as the only ways to build wealth. And that is so much of my conversation around tiny houses. I own my own home, and there are other ways to build wealth. And we have to start, like, it's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And so you were speaking about investing. I guess my question to you is what are your thoughts around those wealth building conversations?
100%. I agree with you. I I'm here in the apartment that I rent
Mm,
in Mexico City. And when I moved here, a lot of folks were like, well, aren't you going to buy a place? Because in the US, that's what you do.
mhm.
Particularly if you are supposed to be a person of a certain socioeconomic status, what have you. Um, that's what you're supposed to do. And I doesn't make sense here for several reasons, but us equating you don't own a home, you're poor. Like
Right.
you cannot have wealth if you don't own a home. That is 100% not true. I was a public school teacher for 19 years, yet I was able to retire at 45. I can tell you what, it wasn't saving the little peanuts and ice water that school district was paying me. That's not what got me in that position. It
Mhm.
was investing. And there are many ways that you can invest. Some people invest in real estate. Some people invest in, businesses, being like the silent partner, what have you. Some people invest in the stock market, and that's what I did. There, it goes back to defining wealth. Are we going to let those people tell us what it means to be wealthy? And I don't think we should. I feel like we need to create our own definition of that. And what it means to be wealthy for me may not be the same for everybody else. And that's okay because that's not my business. My I am my business.
I love it. I actually in my post in Patreon, I said, when Black folks repeat the thought that tiny houses don't build wealth. Only traditional homes and land ownership does. It's actually repeating the language of the oppressor. The same folks who one stole the land and pushed black and brown folks out of their ownership, and then after illegally acquiring it, established it as the way to build wealth. So we're doing their bidding, and and we're already out of the game because they pushed us out the game, and then they're gonna decide that this is the only way to build wealth. That's full circle insanity.
100%. I'm not this is I am like you, and this is not a shock that I see tiny houses as a path to liberation and a way to free ourselves from that. Because again, I don't want to play their game because it's one, it's rigged against me, and two, it's founded on something that's designed to keep me in a subservient position.
Absolutely. 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 So talk to us. So the big challenge for tiny houses is the financing piece of it. Well, there are two challenges: financing of it, and then where to put it. The financing piece of it is what keeps um, mostly Black folks out of it, because the way folks are getting to having the money to build a tiny house is selling a traditional home and using that money to build their tiny house. Or they have, big savings, etc. And then a lot of um, it's personal loans that people are using for getting the money for tiny houses. And a lot of those companies, it's not traditional mortgages that are offered. And so a lot of the companies that offer the loans require you to have stellar credit. And so then that often puts us out of that conversation. How would, I don't think this is my original question. How would you suggest someone who basically is starting from the bottom, what are some thoughts that you have for how they would build up their portfolio to get to tiny house ownership?
Well, I think it depends on what's your time frame,
Hmm.
because I think about the first house that I bought, like I think our time frame was a couple of years.
Okay.
But, knowing what I know now, I would start saving immediately. But like if your time frame, let's say, is 10 years or more, then I would say, okay, as you are putting money aside, maybe invest that so that you can multiply it. But if we're talking about money you want to use in the next 5 years, the market is not the place for that.
Okay.
Really, any any kind of investment, because there's too much volatility. So like if your cousin is opening I don't know, a you buy we fry. I don't know if y'all know what that is.
No, no. I think I know what it is, but I don't think I've
I
heard it
grew up in
termed that
Houston,
way.
and it's
Okay.
like what do you I want to say a
Like
fish
the
store,
fish
but that is not
market,
the right.
like
Yeah,
where
and you
you,
buy
okay.
it, they fry it.
Yes, okay. Okay.
Okay, so let's say your cousin is opening one and you see the potential, there's going to be a lot of customers, and you want to put your money in, and he's like, I will give you twice this amount back. If you need that money in the next 5 years, the first 5 years of a restaurant is not the most stable. So like that's what I mean. I'm not just saying I wouldn't invest in the stock market. I wouldn't invest that money. That money I would put in a high yield savings account, CDs, um, money market accounts. So that it's not sitting in my regular banking account, where I might be tempted or accidentally spend it, out of sight, out of mind, and I wanted to earn some interest. But um, I would start even further back than that. I think you got to understand where your money is going.
Okay.
Folks like to think they know what their money is doing. But if you've not specifically told your money where to go, your money is going to tell you where it went after the fact.
Wait a minute, I need you to say that again. I need you I I need you to say that
You
again.
got to tell your money where to go, or it is going to tell you where it went
After it's gone. It say
after it's
goodbye.
gone. Okay. So, no matter, because I am not somebody who's like big about like, oh, you got to do a budget, blah, blah, blah. I think what's more important is you need to look at where's the money going? How are you currently spending your money? How much money are you currently making? A lot of folks have they think they have an idea of, oh, this is how much I'm making, this is how much I'm spending, but they've never tracked it. They've never actually looked at it. Right now, it's beginning of February. This is a great time, particularly. I know a lot of folks put stuff on their credit cards because they're trying to get points and all that. Get your 2024 summary. All of your credit card companies have now published that. You got all of your statements. They also have that, and you can see how you actually spent your money the last year. And it breaks it down by like restaurants, travel, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
So I would start with where's the money going? How am I actually spending it? Because a lot of times what we think we're doing is not what we're actually doing. Okay. And so from there, first of all, looking at, oh, does this match up with what I thought I was doing? Because a lot of times people will think, I need X thousands of dollars to build this tiny house, and I ain't got it.
Mhm.
Well, why ain't you got it? Where's your money going?
Mhm.
So you can't, I don't think you can make a good informed decision about what to do next unless you know what's currently happening. In particular, and not until people do this do they realize that they are spending more every month than they're actually making,
Mhm.
that they're living outside of their means. So that's where I would start. And from there, I always like to look at, okay, so what are like the wants versus the needs? Like, what are the things that I have to have so I can live? Like, I got to pay this car note, I got to pay the rent, blah, blah, blah. And then where's the gap? Like, I sat down and did this with my oldest child, and she told me she don't have any money. I looked at her numbers and I was like, according to this, you should have $900 every month.
Ooh,
Where's that going? And she
ooh.
couldn't tell me. I
Oh,
was like, well, this is where we have the problem.
and that's a
Okay.
big amount not to know where it
Yeah.
is.
Because she's like, what are you talking about? My
I
bank
need
account is in the negative. I'm like, well, according to this, it should not be.
Mhm.
So you got to look at where are you spending your money? And so we all know about like, oh, there's the joke about like if the millennials weren't eating avocado toast and they weren't
Right.
getting specialized coffee, they
Yeah,
could have been bought a house by now.
right.
And I'm never going to tell somebody to like deny themselves the things that make them happy because the world is hard. So if getting your $9 cup of coffee makes you happy, so be it. But you do want to look at, okay, are there places I can cut? Because saving up the money to pay for this house, this is not forever. This
Mhm.
is for a specific period of time. What can I do without so that I can get this amount of money? And that's the other thing, is knowing how much you need.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times folks will say, well, I can't afford it, but they've not actually figured out how much would this cost me?
Right,
How, you know what I'm saying? Because
right.
I am not a math person, but I am a money person. So if I know that I need $85,000, okay, if I've got 5 years to save that, how much is that? Oh, do I have to save over five? Like I need to break it down
The
into
math,
numbers like
yes,
that,
yes.
because that I can work with. You say I need to come up with an extra $800 a month over the next 6 years, and bam, I got the money I need. So,
Mm,
like, not knowing how much money you have, where it's going, how much money you need, that's where you're already shooting yourself in the foot. Um, There are two ways to make your money go further. Either you reduce your spending or you earn more money.
Reduce your spending, earn more money. I mean that, and that sounds just like basic common sense.
It is that simple. So this might be, as you've looked at what this number is, you know what your runway is. I have this many years where I'd like to have this amount of money at the end of it. Okay, I need an extra $30,000. How can I make that?
Mhm.
Can I cut enough in my budget? Like, are you going to brunch and dropping $700 every month? I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Is there some place that you can cut temporarily? Is there something you can do to increase your income and then funnel that money toward this savings goal? Now, there are not very many good things that came out of me being married, but
Dang.
not not very many. But one thing we did was when we got married, we decided we would live on one person's salary
Mm.
and save the other one. That allowed us to pay off the first house in 6 or 7 years.
Okay. Because the other money that you weren't spending, you weren't living off of, was going directly to the mortgage.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, this is the interest rate on the mortgage was like over 8% because this
Okay.
was in the 90s. If I had a 2% interest rate on my mortgage, I would not be trying to pay it off.
Right.
I could, I
Right.
would be putting that money somewhere else.
Yeah.
But I
Absolutely.
think you could use that same thought process for, okay, if you've got two incomes, I think you absolutely should be trying to leverage that if and see what you can do to your expenses so that one person's salary can cover your expenses and funnel that rest of that money to the house fund so that you could get there in a much shorter time frame. And I think the something else I would consider, because it's a big chunk of money you're trying to save up, is what kind of person are you when it comes to money? Are you someone who, like, a person like me, you tell me that's the number, all right, I'm doing everything and anything to get to that number. I don't need a lot of small victories along the way to keep me motivated.
Gotcha.
The final goal keeps
Mhm.
me motivated just fine.
Mhm.
But if you are someone who 5, 6 years, that's forever. Like, I don't know that I can stick with this that long. You want to build in checkpoints. I've
Nice.
seen people
Mhm.
have little trackers where they color in how much they've saved, so on and so forth. They celebrate, certain milestones, because you got to think about who you are as a person
Right.
and what motivates you and what's going to keep you motivated to keep you on track.
I love all of that practical advice. So does the community. Um, I think the important, one of the big important things in that, in all of that conversation, is like what you said. You're renting. In Mexico, you're renting tiny houses. There's so much stigma, and I find it a lot in our community about the when you say I'm renting, or when I say I live in a tiny house. And I don't know where that comes from, but it has us in a chokehold.
I saw somebody in the comments mention the Afro minimalist
Mhm,
Christine Platt,
mhm.
and like, I'm low key a minimalist as well, but um, I remember there was some conversation about her book, and there was a conversation around, like, is this for Black people, or is this for people who didn't come from fluent backgrounds, like. And so I see that as kind of all being connected. Again, it particularly for Black folks, this idea that if you are renting, you are losing. And I
Right.
think I have actually heard people
Oh,
say that.
absolutely. Right.
And once and I get it, particularly for the Black American experience. So much of what it means to make it from a financial standpoint in the United States, we have been denied access to.
Mhm.
And at least prior to 2025, but after 1965, we'd finally been given access, at least on paper.
Mhm.
And so not pursuing that, it's like, oh, you letting down the folks who came before you.
Oh.
You're supposed to want to play this capitalist game.
Mhm.
And they don't see a win in choosing to opt out of this game and foster a new path. They see it as you're failing. Like, we fought so hard to get into the game, and now you're not even playing to win.
Right. Right.
And so I get it, but and this, I guess this is part of the reason I do this work. It's part of the reason I have the YouTube channel and all of that is, and I've said this before, that for a lot of folks, when they look at the way that I live my life, they would think I'm a failure
Mhm.
instead of somebody who is out here living their best life. And I don't even mean that in the most cliche way. I mean, like, literally, that is what I'm out here
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
But I'm not playing the game. And for a lot of those folks, if you're not playing the game to win it, you're losing.
Yeah.
And so I think for our community specifically, it's more complex and nuanced than just the capitalism conversation, but
Mm.
it is our history and I guess our desire to assimilate into the system
Yes.
that
Yes.
also plays a role here.
The assimilation, the proximity to whiteness, the things that we feel just make us be successful when so much of it is killing us.
Yeah.
It's
I saw somebody mention about like manufactured homes.
Mhm.
The stigma, like
Oh my
I
gosh.
have seen some manufactured homes that just make my mouth fall open. But because it's not a real house, and
Yeah.
therefore it's less than.
Yeah. That's the tiny house conversation, and I will
Yep.
have a guest on in a couple of weeks, and we'll be talking about manufactured housing and mobile homes or trailers, because you say trailers and folks be like, "Oh, no, 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 no."
Oh yeah.
Um, and they were so instrumental in wealth building for so many people because it was housing that allowed them to not overspend to pay for housing.
That part right there. I think we've, and I say we, kind of in the global sense, have kind of lost. We've gotten lost about like what housing is supposed to be.
Yeah.
All of your check should not be going toward a house note
Yeah.
or keeping up a house. Like, you want a place to live. You want a place that is comfortable, that, is a place you enjoy being, but you should not be working solely so that you can afford that. And that you are supposed to be a person outside of work, a person who relaxes, has leisure, participates in hobbies. And if your housing expenses are making up 60% of your income,
Right.
there's no way that you get to be the fullest version of yourself as a human.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've been very transparent with my community and anybody who wants to talk about it. Had my dream in building my tiny house, or as I was designing it 2012, 2013. It was my non-traditional retirement plan, my why, and I always encourage people to write down their why. My why was because I want to live in no freedom. And I put that, I had a picture of that and I put it on my binder as I was doing my research and stuff. And it has been my why. Um, and it has been since having the mini stroke in December 2023 that the practical application of what I said in during that time period came to life, because up till then I still had a job and I was still doing the things. But when all of that kind of came to a screeching halt and I had to live in what I had envisioned, fortunately it's sustaining me. And I'm so very grateful. I've said numerous times, my tiny house is saving my life right now.
In a country, in the US, that so many people are one, not even medical emergency away, but one, I need a new alternator, or the
Mhm.
transmission fell out my truck. Like one event like that away from housing insecurity,
Absolutely.
you would think we would be more aware or be working toward being in a position where housing isn't such a financial burden on us.
Yeah,
But that I've outside of spaces like yours, I rarely see that as part of the conversation.
absolutely.
It is much more because I think about the fact that when they talk about the sizes of the average American home, how that has gotten so much bigger. And I was guilty of that. We went from a 1,200 square foot house to a 3,600 square foot house.
Mhm.
Um, and it never occurred to me who was supposed to clean it or how.
Exactly.
Like, I got a job, there are 3 kids, and somebody's supposed to clean all of this?
Right.
And then a lot of folks on top of that have storage units. Like,
Storage units are taking over the US. If you every corner that you go to and you see something new being built, it is a storage unit. And that just tells you how much stuff people have.
because a lot of the desire is, well, I need more space. And we never interrogate why you feel you need more space. Well, because it's really about this stuff. And
Mhm.
then you get into, well, if, and this is the minimalist in me, if the stuff you have can be stored away 12 months a year, that means you're not using it.
Folks got stuff more than 12 months. Just it's been in
That's
there
what
for
I'm saying.
years. Yeah. They
In a year, you've not used it. You've actually paid to store it someplace. Why are you holding on to it?
and you probably bought the thing that's over there in storage, and you might have bought it again because you don't know what's over there in that
Because you
storage.
don't know what's over there.
Absolutely.
Um, we're getting ready. This is going to be particularly as the boomers start to pass. I think this will be a little less of an issue with the Gen Xers like myself, but boomers have houses full of stuff. And
Mhm.
when they pass, they're going to be leaving fully adult children and grandchildren
With that
who
stuff.
already have their own stuff.
Yeah.
The- it- it-
Yeah.
so, so working myself, I'm not even going to say working myself to death, but working myself so much so that I can afford this house and a place to store all this stuff, but I never have the time to enjoy it. That is not, that's not how I want to use the time that I have left here. When I got divorced, I went full, because I was married to somebody who I think is a hoarder. I think it's dressed up a little bit right now, but I
Mhm.
think low key that's where it's going. And I was like, I got to fully indulge my minimalist nature, and I got a small little apartment and was fine renting that. And everybody was like, "Well, you're not gonna get a house. You're not gonna get another house. Why?" I don't have that much stuff, and it made it really easy when I left the US. There was not much to get rid of.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I did share my Patreon link a few minutes ago. We are reading Christine's book, Living with Less in Patreon. We're getting we get started two I think it's 2 weeks from now. So join us in Patreon if you want to read and engage in community in reading that book with us. I did also see the question about how to connect with Adalia, and I shared um, her website, consultations, connect with her. And then I wanted to go back to the question that I just posted. Brooke says, Black people in the Deep South have land. What would you advise the Black community to connect and make? How would you advise the Black community to connect and make that land work for us? I'll let you go first, and then
This is a question for you, because I'm just going to give the same answer that you're going to give.
okay. Well, I was letting you go first because I feel like people hear me talk all the time on my channel, and I want them, like with a kid, you say the same thing to the kid over and over, and somebody else comes
But they
in,
got to hear it from somebody else.
and the kid be like, the new person said it, and the kid's like, oh my God, I've never heard that before. You just want to slap them.
Okay, so land. People often talk about, like, oh, buy land, there won't be more of it, blah, blah, blah. Well, there's only two ways to make money from your land. It is either to sell it and then you don't own it anymore, and you're hoping to sell it for more than you paid for it, or to put it to work in some way, whether that's you developing it, or what I think is a great use for it, for tiny houses, like parking for tiny houses, putting animals on it so you can get that agricultural exemption on your taxes. I think that's a great way to use it, because again, as Black Americans, our relationship with home ownership, land ownership, it's different. It is complicated. So this idea of, well, we got this property, let's sell it to the developed, like, for us, while that might make a lot of money, might that might not be the best way to go, because you might want to honor the ancestors who did what they had to do to get that land in the family in the first place. And this is why I think having it be a place where people can put tiny homes, like, it's like this small thing you're doing that's doing an immense amount of good, like different levels of good all at the same time,
Come
because
on, Adalia.
you're getting to keep the land in the family and pass it on to future generations. You're getting to generate income, but you're also facilitating someone else being able to live their dream
And there you
by
have it.
having an affordable place, having a place where they can put a house that's not causing them to have to work all the time. So, like, I think it's like one of the highest goods.
I didn't even pay Adalia for that.
No.
So listen, the it doesn't require a lot of land to have tiny homes. So you can save the whole family by building your family compound on the land. You can rent out parking on the land, because I'm not talking about putting a tiny house on foundation. I'm talking about tiny houses on wheels. So you then keep the property, and somebody is paying you to rent a parking spot on your land. You're not selling your land, you're bringing in income. You could do that multiple times over. You could have a farm on that land that you're trying to get up and going. So many people in tiny houses are interested in that type of thing. And so they're renting parking on your land. You're providing a safe space for them to have parking on your land. And they're interested in helping you get the farm up and running, because that's also something that they want to do. This is the thing that I talk about, that I feel like our community needs such a healing. And this is one of the ways, because I saw somebody else saying how we've migrated from the South and we've gone to the North. Absolutely. And a lot of that was for safety. We had to save our lives and get out of the South. But we still have land in the South. There is such a healing for available to our community if we look at that. A healing in the family is all spread out. We don't talk. We got bring them together. Grow your family, especially now with this shit show we got going on right now. We are all we got, and we need to be bringing ourselves our in together as forces to look out for each other and to take care of each other.
As somebody who was a traditional landlord, um, being like a tiny house, parking I also see it as a way to profit from real estate, but in a less exploitive way
Hmm. Hmm.
than the more traditional route of I own this house and I've got a mortgage on it and I'm going to charge you rent so that I can make that mortgage, plus I'm going to charge you extra so I can have some money in my pocket, because there's some questionable things there. But this would be a way that you could still be a landlord, but I think in a much nicer, much more person centric friendly way.
Yeah. So Deborah mentioned that the storage units also represent people losing housing, possibly living in a shelter and needing a place to hold their possessions. No shame in understanding that. But we also know that the large majority, no, I can't say, I haven't done the research on it. So I hate when people come up with some facts. I would imagine that a large majority of the need for storage units is just is around excess. No shame for, like, at my storage unit, I knew that there were actually people living in the storage unit, and that's a totally different conversation. Um, we all, but so much of that conversation also has to do with society and the way we're living, and as we just talked about a few minutes ago, you're one accident, one paycheck, one thing away from being unhoused and housing insecurity. And there's so much of ways that that could be fixable if we started having more of these non-traditional these conversations around non-traditional housing and wealth building.
Calling it non-traditional is really interesting because this is how people used to live. People didn't
Yes.
used to have one
Yes.
these big individual houses. People lived multi-generationally, or the dwelling they lived in was not enormous. And I know everybody doesn't have a big house, but a lot of Americans do, are living in far more space than people had traditionally. And so it's interesting that what we consider now traditional
Yeah.
is really not.
Right. Right.
We're talking about what, like 60 years?
Yeah. And that brings up another point. That's also why our community has such a hard time even considering tiny houses, because we're not so far removed from having to live in the small house or in the outhouse experience. So when you start talking about a compost toilet, people are like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm not doing that. Or, you know, great grandma still lives in a small house in a rural space, and they feel embarrassed when they go to visit her, like that's a negative for them. And so to bring that back around, that's the experience, and to bring that conversation back around, it presents a hard sell for our community. Yeah.
It again goes back to whose definition are
Mhm.
we using, and trying to assimilate. What is it? Not the Black excellence people, but what is it called? respectability politics
Oh,
is
yeah.
where
Mm,
this fits in, because it's basically appealing to the gaze or the acceptance of white folks.
mhm, mhm,
And when folks feel that twinge of embarrassment, that's a great moment to ask yourself why. Instead of being like, grandma lives in this house that this house has been in our family for however many 100 years, which should be a point of pride,
mhm,
and that there
mhm,
is no mortgage, it's owned free and clear. That should be a point of pride. Why, when you feel that twinge of embarrassment, that's a great time to really dig deeper. And why am I embarrassed?
mhm, mhm.
Because I think a lot of the things we are feeling, if we interrogate them a little bit, might help us unpack some of this stuff.
Absolutely. Um, in Tracy Collins' leadership community, and we were talking the other day about the imposter syndrome. And someone was talking about, feeling that in work and how that's a common thing. And of course, I forgot, I made a note about it. Um, but I was mentioning, like, what I've learned, that imposter syndrome is, it's not imposter syndrome. It is us having, and I can't think of my word I wanted to say right now, um, taking in the lie of white supremacy, where we've, whatever my I word is, that somebody's gonna come. Tracy might still be here to remind me. I had a whole acronym around it. I feel like we need to stop calling it imposter syndrome and call it whatever my I word is, in the lie of white supremacy, because that is what it is. That like the gaze that you were just talking about, that is what it is. That is the issue. It's not that we're not we it's not that we're feeling not confident about ourselves. It is what society has said, that we're not, that
Yes,
we're,
that this is the measuring stick. And
yes,
if you're not here, and we have to be honest and admit that the measuring stick
yeah,
is tied to white supremacy.
right,
And so that's why I say interrogate. Why do you feel that this isn't enough?
yeah,
Because and inevitably, I suspect it'll come back to, well, what them white folks gonna think?
right, right. That's what it comes down to. Exactly. And unfortunately, we didn't just make that up ourselves. I'm going through my notes because I'm gonna find what I have an acronym for it and everything. We didn't just make that up. What has happened is that our a couple of generations ahead of us, that became their measuring stick. As we moved out of enslavement, as we moved out of segregation, then it became being like them and keeping up with them. And so we've often heard, go do this, go do that, as and it was things that they were doing, and even like when we talk about farming, we we were pushed, the younger folks were pushed away from farming because the parents wanted them to go do better and be better and all of those things, but the better was measured by them and not us.
Exactly. Because it wasn't go go to law school so we can have lawyers in the community.
Right,
Go get your medical degree so the community can have a doctor. It's go get those things so you can make money so that you can fit into that society.
right,
And I don't want anybody to feel like I'm trying to pile on folks, but I think we need to have some open and honest conversations about, again, our experience in the world is complicated. It is nuanced, but a lot of the things that we hold as these beliefs and these standards, we got to interrogate, where does that come from? And it's not really serving us.
It's not at all. That's my I word, internalized. That's what I said it was. We need to call, instead of imposter syndrome, it is internal IWS, internalized white supremacy.
Supremacy. That's really what
The
it
lie
is.
of white supremacy. That's what we've internalized. Thank you. I knew an I word would come up. My community knows that I don't. Thank you. There's Tracy over there. My community knows that I had a stroke, and sometimes my words don't show up, so they'll just be throwing words in the chat until they get to it. I appreciate y'all. That's exactly what it was. It's not the imposter syndrome. It is absolutely that. And like you said, the bar that we keep trying to aspire to is is their bar, but we will achieve it, we will exceed it, and they're still at mediocrity and just kind of watching. Look
And it
at them
still
go.
isn't good enough. It doesn't get us the prize and the results, the inclusion. It doesn't get us any of those things.
No,
And I would also argue it does us a disservice. And so, us defining what success looks like,
yeah,
us redefining, and that's going to be some work for each of us because we're all carrying different levels of that IWS,
absolutely,
and in different parts of our lives.
absolutely, absolutely. And that the 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 healing, because tiny houses are my thing. As I sit here and look, like, so everybody, why don't you buy land? I don't want to be responsible for some land. I'm happy to sit on somebody else's land that they have to do all the things and pay my little parking and mind my business. Um, and this brings me so much joy. And I just want that for us, kind of like what you were saying, when you're living your best life. Like, I got some stuff I'm working on right now, from a financial standpoint, having lost my disability benefits. But where I'm going to live, my housing is not one of my concerns. And that's big.
That's enormous. That there's a certain amount of freedom in that. That's something you don't have to worry about. You are not stressing about that, and that frees up space to figure out the rest.
I felt like a baller because, listen, when my when they was like, this is your last check, I took some money and paid up my rent. I could have paid my rent through the end of the year, but I paid it, for the next few months. And it was like, I've never paid housing, I've never been in a position to pay for my housing in advance. But look, and she was like, are you leaving? Are you going to Mexico? She knew something was up. She, what are you doing? I'm just paying you because I just want the security of, I got housing. It's a cow next door. If I gotta let my car go and ride this cow, it that's a totally different conversation. And I want us to we deserve that. Like, we continue to go through so much, and it's only getting worse. Like, we deserve a lot of that. We deserve, our nervous systems deserve that. We've been on go since being brought over on those ships, and our community deserves, our families deserve, our bodies, our health, our mental well-being deserves being in a space that we are not having to carry all of that, and we can breathe.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, people have commented over the last few years about how much lightness there is with me because,
Hmm.
you know, I was just having this conversation with my young millennial roommate about being Gen X means you've basically been an adult since you were 8 years old.
Absolutely. I've been working since I was in the 7th grade. Yes.
And and so I was not a light person before because I've been an adult since I was 8.
Yes.
And people often comment that there is a lightness to me now. There I seem so happy. It is because I have opted out of that system and that definition of happiness. And I have made choices that have given me the freedom, that have made me less stressed. And for me, that is renting this apartment from a nice little old man who he's just like, y'all pay the rent on time. That's great. Like I don't have to fix things. He takes care of that, or he calls somebody to come fix it.
Right.
You know, if in a couple of years we wanna live somewhere else, we can easily do that, as opposed to most apartments sit on the market in Mexico City, 3 to 5 years.
Wow. Oh, so that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Of why they're so willing to work with you and just happy that somebody's here paying the bills. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I it trying so, like, had I done the very American thing and come here and bought something and then decided, "Oh, no, this is not the city for me," or "I wanna go somewhere else," it would have taken me years, if
Mm,
I was lucky, to
mhm.
be able to get my money back out of that purchase.
Yeah. One of the things that I've added as a tagline is giving yourself the opportunity to be irresponsible. Having had to be so responsible. And the other week that the when I said that, it bothered somebody and they commented and said that, why would you want to be irresponsible? Like, why would you aspire to be irresponsible? Somebody, Crystal just said, we've been adulting our whole lives. That's why I want
Yes,
to be irresponsible. That is exactly why. Because we've had to
100%.
be. Yeah, we have to be on go. And so the opportunity to be irresponsible and the opportunity to focus on more than doing all the things and being responsible for all of the things. I'm gonna drop Adalia's link again to work with her. Also going to drop a link to Adalia has a retreat, reclaim the retreat. Talk to us like now as we're talking about what we what we deserve, how we want to be in those in that. Uh-oh. Oh, I thought I hit the wrong button. I thought I hit the ended the stream. Talk to us about your retreat and what that means for people, for women.
That a lot of what we talked about here today is sort of the focus of the retreat. The name, very intentional. It Our retreats are about reclaiming yourself, reclaiming your time, your happiness, your dreams, getting to a clearer understanding of what's important to you and how to structure your life so that that's what you're living every day. You're not wasting the little bit of time that we have on this planet on things that are not very meaningful to you. I like to say that the retreats have three pillars: coaching, culture, and community.
Okay.
So every experience we in North Carolina, in Oaxaca, Mexico, in El Salvador, uh, every retreat, there's going to be a culture piece weaved throughout the week. We are very intentional about the locations of our retreat and choosing places where folks are reclaiming some space,
Mhm.
whether that's in the southern part of the United States, in rural Oaxaca, Mexico, or in El Salvador. You know, these are all places people got a lot of stuff made up in their heads and their minds about what it's like there. And we go and immerse ourselves and work specifically with Black, Indigenous, woman-owned businesses, so that the money we put into the community stays in the community.
Mhm.
um, I am a financial coach. My partner is a life and leadership coach. And so all of our retreats include a coaching component to help you get clear on the life you want and how you can get it. And then there's the community. You get to spend a week or whatever with other women and femmes who are also trying to be out here living their best life. And so, because it's sometimes hard when you're at home and you're trying to step outside the box, do things
Right.
differently, and everybody else is like, "Girl, what you doing?
Mhm.
This is the way we've always done it."
Mhm.
At our retreats, you get a chance to connect with other women who are also questioning those things and looking to do things differently, and create some community there. So it's a good time. I probably don't talk it up enough because I'm not very good at that.
Probably. You wanna say probably? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But after every retreat, there's multiple women who are like, "This has changed my life."
Mhm.
Like, we just got a email the other week about how had they not come to this retreat, they wouldn't have had the confidence to try this new thing, and now they're getting to, I think they're moving to Ecuador because of, based on the coaching they got, they were more willing and confident to step into some different things that they wouldn't have been otherwise. So it's a good time. It's a good time.
The community aspect, that's we've been talking about that a lot here, how much we need community and, how and now more than ever, and how being in community, that's the same thing that you just mentioned about how, you'll have a dream, and if the folks around you aren't co-signing that dream and sometimes will be negative about your dream, it'll have you second guessing what you're doing and your why. And so you need to be in spaces with like-minded people. They don't have to be doing the same thing you're doing, but like-minded people who have the vision to think outside of the box. Whatever it is that they're doing, whatever you're doing, like you're able to support each other. And so that's big. I had the opportunity. So one of Adalia's retreats that was last year, right?
Yeah, it
Was that
seems like forever ago,
it?
but that was just last April.
Yes, last April they were in Asheville. They started out in Asheville and then they were going to Pharmacies, Clarinda's base. And so I had the opportunity to connect with them in Durham after they had left Asheville, went to where Clarinda Green Heifer Farms, and then I connected with them in Durham, and they were exploring Durham. And Durham, North Carolina, has a really rich Black culture. I lived in Durham in my elementary school, and my sister was born in Durham, Chapel Hill. And so living in Durham, and my mother worked in that area where we stayed, and there the building, one of the buildings had become a museum, and so that area was kind of nostalgic for me. In knowing my mom worked in that area, didn't live didn't really explore it at the time, but just kind of a route along with my mom. But I had the opportunity to connect with them and hang out a couple of evenings, and the ladies there were just really having a really, really good time. So if it is an opportunity for you to participate, I would absolutely encourage you to do so. Um, I'm also going to throw somebody asked about having land and wanting to advertise the land. I do have my find tinyhouseparking.com that if you have land and you want to offer it to people to park on, that is where you can do that. If you're looking for tiny house parking, if you're a builder, GC, want to advertise your services, if you want to connect with people to build communities, and then if you have a tiny house that you want to sell, all of that is available in findtinyhouseparking.com. That is the app that I created. And then I'm going to also across the bottom of um the screen, you
Screen.
see the thank you. You see the link for the masterclass. It kicks off tomorrow. 4-week masterclass. It is amazing, if I do say so myself. And so join us. Really excited. It is at your own pace. You get a video accessories, resources, workbook to go along with the video. It drops every Monday. You do your work with the content, with the workbook. There's a community that you can participate in of other, again, like-minded folks who are interested in the movement to ask questions, to share during this 4-week time period. You have there is a live Q&A session for premium and VIP attendees, and then there's a one-on-one 30-minute one-on-one feedback session with me for those who sign up for the VIP attendance. And so it kicks off tomorrow. I would encourage you. It is all the things that, from concept to actual building, the lifestyle and placement and community. So sign up for it. I would love to see you in the masterclass kicking off tomorrow. Adalia, I ask my guests, what would be the name of your autobiography if you were to write one?
I was told there would be cake.
Like why you went, because it was going to be cake. That's me. That's me. I try to judge people. Are they going to have good birthday cake? Are they going to have good wedding cake? And that's how I decide if I'm going. I love that. Go ahead.
I think that sums up my life. Like,
I love that. I love that. Okay, so I'm gonna come back to that. So the question is, what time is the live questions for the masterclass? Okay, so let me go back. You will have access to all of the content for a lifetime. And then the Q&A session is, I can never remember. It is March. It is the last week of the 4 weeks. It is scheduled for Saturday, March the 8th. That is the last day, the last week of the 4 weeks. So the live Q&A session is Saturday, March 8th from 12 to 2. However, if you are not able to attend the live session, it will be recorded and provided to premium and VIP attendees. You can ask questions in the community all along. And if it's specific to your situation, you want to ask specific questions, that was when you would want to sign up for the VIP session, so you can have that one-on-one feedback and talk about, your specifics. But other than that, everything will be recorded and provided for you. Thank you for asking that question. I was told there would be cake. And I think that is so fitting for you. Like that ties into the picky girl. Like, so you explained that you're just picky. So I imagine that you just ain't showing up.
no, I'm not, because I just turned down, somebody was putting together an event, and I am an introvert and I am selectively social.
Mm-hmm.
And the way the event was described, when they were pitching it, I was like, okay, this is low key, I can do it. And then they came back with the details, and I was like, this is too much. And I was like, hey, I'm gonna have to pass. This is not the low key chill event I thought it was. And that's exactly what I said. Because no, I can't do it. So yes, I am picky.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate, because this is also something that I talk about and we talk about here and I share with friends. I and my Nina Simone, you got to learn got to learn to leave the table when love's no longer being served. I don't want to go places just because people expect me to be there, or just because it's family, I'm expected to be there. If it's not a place I want to be, and it's not necessarily, so I understand you're not saying, it's a bad space for you. It's just not something you
No.
want to do.
And I no longer do things out of obligation.
Yes. Yes.
So in this situation, very much could say, oh, well, I already told her I was coming. No,
You're
I
you
don't
get
want to be there.
Yeah.
So I'm not going.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The information will be in the description for the folks, and all of this information will be in the description for folks who are watching in the future. As I'm gonna say hi to y'all in the future, as Stephanie does. Adalia, tell us where folks can find you and how they can work with you.
They can work with me. If you go to my website, Picky Girl Travels the World, there is a work with me tab, either through coaching or just kind of like a one-on-one pick my brain sort of thing. And most of the time I am on YouTube. Picky Girl Travels the World on YouTube, or Picky Girl Travels on Instagram. That's where I am most of the time.
All right. Don't forget about Reclaim the Retreat. There is the link again for that. What's one question I didn't ask that you wish I had asked, or is there one question that I didn't ask?
Um, well, I don't know if it's a question, but one thing I wanted to say when we were talking about, saving and like getting that money together, I think the biggest mistake most of us make is when we think about saving, we think about, well, I got to pay all of this. And then we attempt to save out of the money that is left over.
Say that again. Say that again.
So, like, I need to be saving up for my tiny house, but I got to pay the rent. I got to pay this. I got my cell phone. I got this, that, and the other thing. And then let me see what's left so I
Mhm.
can put the money aside.
Mhm.
I say you should be paying yourself first.
Mhm.
Switch that around. You figured out how much per month you should be putting aside to meet your goal. Take that money off the top before you spend anything. Pay yourself first. Save first. Live off what is left. And I know immediately some people
I,
are like, but hold
yeah,
on,
that's what I
the
was
math
saying.
ain't okay.
Mhm.
You need to, that's why you got to look at those numbers. You got to ask yourself some questions about where the money is going. And if you can't meet, like your goal is, I want to save $600 a month. If you can't do that, start with $100.
Mhm.
And every time you get paid, increase it.
Mhm.
But you have, I think, shifting your mindset on that one thing, I know for me, it changed my life because I prioritized my financial goal, whatever that happened to be. And I paid myself first. And then I can make the rest of it work instead of sacrificing my financial goal because I'm trying to save out of what is left over. So that's the one thing I wish I would have said.
I think that that's excellent and important. So thank you. I think that also kind of taps into that scarcity mindset. You're trying to save from scarcity, from what's left over versus from the top, the bigger bucket, and then adapting. And that goes back to what you said to us about having to look at your money, look at your numbers, like what you said you did with your daughter, looking at her numbers and there was $900. If we're not looking at it, then we're operating in the dark.
And there's so many things that will come up where there's not money for you to put aside to build a tiny house, to do whatever it is that you're trying to do, because you've not really made it a priority.
Mhm. And that is what is the saying that what you focus on becomes the reality. So if you're focusing on your savings, then and you're focused on the savings for the tiny house. And so I've always shared whatever goal I'm working on, I will set up a separate bank account and I will name that bank account. So when I was saving for my tiny house, the name of that bank account was Tiny House Fund. And as I looked at my account, it often prevented me from doing something dumb because here was my account that I knew I could put that money in and was going toward this goal. And it was the milestones, it was the encouragement that I needed to look in there and see that fund growing because my account was Tiny House Fund.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then the paying ourselves first. people always say, like, when you, somebody just was saying about a bonus, um, when you get the extra or when you pay off a bill, keep paying that, but putting it into that fund. Don't stop
Yep.
paying it and then spend that money somewhere else. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for I'm glad I asked you that question. Thank you for that's important. Thank you for bringing that back up. All right, so I'll have to figure out how we have you back, and maybe we do a special class for folks that gets more into some strategies for saving for the tiny house. We'll have to figure something out that we because this was excellent.
Well, I enjoyed myself.
Well, and the funny thing is, this has been the most unorganized get my guest on here. Adalia and I meet monthly. I said last month I want to have you on the channel. I didn't follow up. It was most unorganized. We didn't really talk about what I didn't do any of the what I usually like prepping other guests because I knew Adalia had stuff she was going to talk about. But this conversation has been so great in spite of just imagine if we prepared and practiced. It has been so great. And I appreciate you. Like I've seen you being in your element in this conversation. And I really appreciated that because I knew that as I saw you get going, I was like, oh yeah, she's loving this conversation. So I
Oh yeah,
appreciated that. I really appreciated that. All right, good
anytime.
people. Good people. Join the retreat. Reclaim the retreat. Join the Tiny House Masterclass. Join Patreon if you want to read some books with us and be in community. Get in community somewhere. I'm going to keep saying that. We need each other. Thank y'all for showing up on Sundays here. Crystal is on all the things. Patreon, share some love, um, like and share the video because it was excellent. So there's no reason you wouldn't share it. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel. Make sure you're subscribed to Picky Girl Travels the World. Thank you. It was, Kathy says it's good to see us together. It was a really good conversation. Thank you, Adalia, a million times.
You're very welcome.
Happy Sunday, good people. Have a good rest of the week. Take care of yourself. Remember, we're protecting our joy. We're not participating and taking in all of the shit show that's happening. We're not doing that. We're taking care of ourselves. And so protect your mental, physical, all the things that we've been preparing for. Because you remember, it is chess, not checkers. We are doing the things to take care of ourselves. And this conversation was so much in alignment with the things that we need to be doing for ourselves because we are working on our liberation. And it might not look like out of the country for you, or it might look like part-time, whatever it looks like. You might not have any desire to do any of that, but still taking care of ourselves and doing the things for ourselves to take care of and ourselves and for our liberation. Hang on, Adalia, for a second. Y'all take care. I'll talk to you all next week or in the masterclass. If you are in the masterclass, Jazzy D says we had wonderfully matched energy. Thank you. Absolutely. I appreciate y'all. Talk to you later.